They did not arrive with weapons charged. That was the first mistake. Across the Orion Spur, where ancient empires traced their borders in starlight and probability curves, the arrival of the Varelian Concordance barely registered as an event. Their vessels slipped into Sol system space with quiet precision, silver hulls gliding on gravitational harmonics refined over 10,000 years of exploration. No alarms screamed across the galaxy. No war councils convened, because this was not an invasion. It was an evaluation. The Concordance did not conquer worlds anymore, not directly. They had learned long ago that domination was inefficient. Broken worlds were expensive. Subjugated populations were unstable. But measured compliance? That endured. And Earth was young. Humanity had been interstellar for less than a century. Their presence in the wider galaxy was recent, loud, and, according to most assessments, temporary. They had expanded rapidly, fueled by desperation, ambition, and an almost reckless faith in improvisation. To older species, that never lasted. The Varelians had seen it before. They were tall, willowy beings, their bodies composed of layered bioluminescent filaments that shifted color with mood and cognition. Their eyes, large, multifaceted, and softly glowing, were capable of processing probability fields as easily as light. Where humans relied on instinct, Varelians relied on prediction. And every prediction pointed to the same conclusion. Humanity would fail the test. The Concordance's prime analyst, Seilerin, stood within the observation chamber as Sol system unfolded before her. Earth glowed blue and white beneath her, wrapped in clouds and radio noise and the constant chatter of a species that had never learned to be quiet. "Confirm parameters," she said calmly. A subordinate inclined his head. "Observation only engagement. No hostile actions. Stress thresholds will be applied incrementally." And expected outcome? The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the probability lattice updated. "Compliance or collapse," the subordinate replied. 89% likelihood. Seilerin's filaments pulsed a soft amber. Approval. Humans called it first contact. The Concordance called it phase 1. The first sign came as a distortion in high orbit, barely detectable, a ripple that sent automated satellites into diagnostic loops. Earth's space agencies noticed it within minutes. Military sensors followed shortly after. Within the hour, every major government on the planet was aware that something had entered Sol space. It did not hide. A single Varelian vessel positioned itself above Earth's equator, vast but elegant, its surface reflecting sunlight in smooth, liquid gradients. No weapons arrays were visible. No fighters deployed. Just presence. A statement without words. Human media erupted. News anchors speculated wildly. Social networks flooded with grainy telescope images. Religious groups declared omens. Economists predicted collapse. Military strategists stared at data that didn't fit their models. And somewhere between panic and wonder, humanity did what it always did in moments of existential uncertainty. They argued. The emergency session of the United Earth Assembly convened less than 6 hours later. Delegates spoke over one another, translators lagging behind emotions running faster than reason. "They haven't attacked. That doesn't mean they won't. We should hail them. What if that's what they want?" At the center of the chamber sat Dr. Elena Moreau, Earth's appointed xenodiplomatic envoy. She had not spoken yet. She was watching the feeds, the projections, the endless data scrolling past. "They're not here to talk," she said quietly. The room fell still. A general turned toward her. "On what basis?" Dr. Moreau folded her hands. "They're too calm. No escalation posture. No demands. They're observing." "And that's worse?" someone asked. She nodded. "Much worse." The first message from the Concordance arrived precisely 12 hours after orbital insertion. Not a greeting, not a threat, a question. "Demonstrate your planetary resilience." That was all. No clarification, no explanation. The message repeated across every frequency humanity monitored, translated seamlessly into every language. Scientists analyzed it. Linguists dissected it. Philosophers argued over its meaning. Resilience. What did that even mean? The concordance began applying pressure the following day. Not violence, constraints. Navigation systems across Earth's orbital infrastructure experienced intermittent failures. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to delay launches, disrupt supply chains, and strain coordination. Solar monitoring satellites reported anomalies, solar flares that shouldn't exist, radiation spikes that forced stations to shut down temporarily. Then came the economic stress. Trade algorithms began failing in subtle ways. Market predictions skewed. Shipping routes through near-Earth space became unreliable. Insurance premiums skyrocketed overnight. Human systems, so interconnected, so dependent on constant optimization, began to wobble. Still, no one died. And that, Seilerin noted with interest, was where humans began to fracture. The concordance watched as debates turned bitter. Some governments demanded immediate concessions, offers of resources, territory, cooperation. Others called for defiance. Protesters filled streets. Conspiracy theories flourished. The Varelians recorded everything. Psychological resilience, degrading, social cohesion, unstable, adaptive response, chaotic. Seilerin observed calmly. Apply next threshold, she ordered. The power grids flickered next. Not outages, just irregularities. Enough to force rolling blackouts. Enough to test redundancy systems. Enough to push emergency services to their limits. Hospitals switched to backup generators. Traffic systems failed. Cities dimmed. And still no attack. No enemy to strike. Just a universe that seemed to push back. Humanity struggled, but it did not break. In Mumbai, engineers slept beneath control panels, rerouting power manually when automation failed. In Nairobi, medical staff carried patients down dark stairwells when elevators stopped working. In Sao Paulo, volunteers directed traffic by hand for 16 straight hours. No one coordinated this globally. They simply did it. Seilerin's filaments shifted, a color bordering on uncertainty. That behavior was not predicted, a subordinate noted. No, she agreed. They are inefficient but persistent. On the seventh day, the concordance escalated again. Communication delays were introduced, milliseconds at first, then seconds. Satellite relays fell out of sync. Internet infrastructure lagged unpredictably. Humanity's greatest strength, instantaneous connection, became a liability. And that was when the concordance expected surrender. Historically, this was the breaking point. Species pleaded. They offered submission. They asked for terms. Humanity did something else. They adapted sideways. Local networks formed when global ones failed. Old radio systems were dusted off. Amateur operators became vital relays. Paper records reappeared. Analog backups, laughed at for decades, saved lives. A Varelian analyst frowned at the data. They're regressing technologically. Seilerin corrected him gently. They're diversifying. The prime analyst watched humans struggle, argue, fail, and then stand back up. Again and again. Resilience curves began to bend. Not upward, but outward. Humanity was not resisting the pressure directly. They were absorbing it. And for the first time since the concordance had begun its evaluation centuries ago, Seilerin felt something unfamiliar ripple through her filaments. Doubt. Because this was supposed to be simple. Pressure in. Compliance out. Instead, Earth endured. Scarred. Exhausted. Unyielding. And the concordance had not yet reached the limits. But humanity was starting to show them something unexpected. Not strength. Not dominance. But resolve. And that, the galaxy would soon learn, was far more dangerous. By the second week, the galaxy expected Earth to kneel. That expectation did not come from malice. Came from precedent. Every civilization the Varelian concordance had tested before followed a familiar arc. First, there was confusion, then fear, then fragmentation, and finally appeal. A request for guidance, protection, intervention. A willingness to yield autonomy in exchange for stability. It was not cruelty. It was what the Concordance called benevolent filtration. Civilizations that could not endure controlled stress were deemed unfit for the greater galactic ecosystem. Those that complied early survived, smaller, quieter, manageable. Earth, by all predictive models, should have reached that stage already. Instead, the noise coming from the planet below had changed. Sci stood again in the observation chamber, watching Earth rotate beneath the Concordance vessel. Her filaments glowed a muted teal, the color of focused assessment. "Update," she requested. The response came hesitantly. Global systems remain degraded, but collapse has not occurred. Adaptive behaviors are increasing. Define increasing. The analyst gestured, and the chamber filled with layered projections. Human cities pulsed with uneven light. Transportation networks flickered in improvised patterns. Data streams fragmented and then reconnected through unexpected paths. They are no longer attempting to restore previous efficiencies, the analyst explained. They are redefining acceptable baselines. Sci considered that. Civilizations, in her experience, clung desperately to what they had built. When systems failed, they tried to repair them exactly as they were. The Concordance exploited that rigidity. Stress fractured pride. Pride delayed adaptation. Delay led to failure. Humans were doing something else entirely. They were letting things go. On Earth, Dr. Elena Moreau stared at a whiteboard covered in crossed-out plans. "This isn't a problem we can fix," she said to the small team gathered around her. Scientists, engineers, sociologists, people who had been pulled together not because of rank, but because of perspective. "It's a problem we have to live through." A young systems analyst frowned. "With respect, ma'am, that's not a strategy." Dr. Moreau smiled tiredly. "It's the only one we have." The pressure had become intimate. Water purification plants ran at reduced capacity. Food distribution faltered. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to stretch margins thin. Enough to remind every human that their modern lives balanced on systems they barely understood. And yet, something unexpected happened. Communities slowed down. Local production surged where global logistics failed. Neighbors checked on neighbors. Skills that had been hobbies, gardening, mechanical repair, amateur radio became essential. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't efficient. But it worked. In a small town in northern Canada, an elderly man taught teenagers how to repair diesel generators by hand. In Jakarta, rooftop gardens spread across concrete skylines. In rural India, solar microgrids, once dismissed as impractical, kept clinics running through long nights. Humanity, under pressure, began to remember how to be human. The Concordance watched all of it. "This level of decentralized adaptation is statistically improbable," an analyst said. Sci-Fi's eyes narrowed. "They are not optimizing. They are enduring." On the 15th day, the Concordance introduced social strain. It was subtle, precision-targeted misinformation injected into fractured networks. Contradictory signals. Confusion layered atop exhaustion. Historically, this was devastating. Species turned on one another. Blame spread faster than solutions. Internal conflict did the work of conquest without a single shot fired. First, it seemed to be working. Protests intensified. Accusations flew. Old divisions reopened like unhealed wounds. But then something shifted. The narratives didn't consolidate. They fragmented. Instead of one dominant lie tearing societies apart, there were too many competing falsehoods. Humans argued, yes, but they argued loudly, visibly, in public. Misinformation was challenged in real time, debunked, mocked, absorbed, rejected. Chaos, yes, but not collapse. A Concordance behavioral specialist spoke quietly. "They appear accustomed to this." Sci felt an uncomfortable realization settle into her core. Humans had been training for this their entire history. Internal conflict was not a breaking force for them. It was a crucible. Messy, painful, but survivable. "They do not require consensus to function," she murmured. "Only participation." The next escalation was meant to end it. Selective orbital interference. The Concordance disrupted a single major space elevator. a symbol of humanity's technological pride. The structure did not fall, but its operations halted, stranding cargo, delaying orbital construction, sending shockwaves through Earth's already strained economy. This time, the Concordants expected outrage. They expected fear. They expected a message. Instead, what they received was silence. For 6 hours, Earth did not respond. Then, a transmission appeared, not from a government, not from a military channel, but from a civilian frequency. It was unpolished, raw. A woman's voice, tired but steady. "We know you're watching," she said. "So watch this too." The feed cut to images, not of protests, not of weapons, of people working, engineers dismantling old infrastructure to repurpose materials, dockworkers manually unloading delayed shipments, astronauts, grounded by the elevator's failure, training replacements instead of waiting. "We don't know what you want," the woman continued, "but we know who we are. You can slow us down. You can make it harder." She paused, swallowing. "But you can't make us stop being us." The transmission ended. The chamber aboard the Concordance vessel was utterly silent. "That message was not authorized," an analyst said. "No," Seilerin replied slowly. "It was authentic." For the first time, the probability lattice flickered, not with new data but with error. Predictions diverged. Human resilience metrics refused to stabilize. They did not spike dramatically. They did not plummet. They held, steady, stubborn. "Begin Phase 2 assessment," Seilerin ordered, though something in her tone had changed. "What parameters?" a subordinate asked. She hesitated. "Individual response," she said at last. "Let us see what one human does when the pressure becomes personal." Below, on Earth, humanity had no idea that the test was about to narrow, that the galaxy's gaze was about to focus, not on their systems or their cities or their species as a whole, but on a single choice, a single moment, and a single human who would, without ever knowing it, redefine the meaning of resolve. The Concordants had learned long ago that species could hide behind numbers. Civilizations, when observed in aggregate, often appeared resilient far beyond what any individual within them could sustain. Societal momentum masked fragility. Systems compensated. Populations absorbed loss. But individuals? Individuals were where pressure revealed truth. Seilerin selected the subject personally. Not a leader, not a soldier, not a symbol, a maintenance engineer. Her designation in Earth records was Mara Kincaid. Age, 39. Occupation, orbital infrastructure technician, secondary tier. Noteworthy traits, none. She lived in a coastal city whose skyline had dimmed since the elevator failure. Her days were defined by long shifts, short meals, and a quiet apartment overlooking a harbor that no longer glowed at night. She was, by every Concordance metric, average. And that was precisely why she was chosen. The intervention was surgical. One system, one failure, one human. Mara was assigned to an emergency repair team restoring a jury-rigged power relay feeding a medical district. The relay was old pre-elevator era, inefficient, temperamental. But it worked, until it didn't. At 2:17 local time, the Concordance introduced a micro-disruption, a fraction of a second of interference. Invisible, undetectable, the relay failed. Lights went out across 3 hospitals. Life support alarms screamed into the dark. Mara froze, not because she was afraid, but because she understood immediately what had happened. "This isn't random," she said into her headset. Her voice was tight, controlled. The breaker didn't trip. The whole system just vanished. Static answered her. Communications were degraded again. The Concordants had learned that silence, at the right moment, was more terrifying than force. Mara ran. She didn't wait for orders, didn't check protocol. She sprinted down the narrow maintenance corridor toward the manual override chamber, boots pounding against metal steps slick with condensation. Her lungs burned. Her mind raced. She knew the override was dangerous. It had been flagged years ago, obsolete, unstable, requiring direct physical engagement. Using it meant exposure to feedback surges strong enough to stop a heart. It was the reason automation had replaced it. It was also the only thing left. She reached the chamber and forced the door open. Darkness greeted her. Emergency glow strips flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the machinery. The override console sat in the center, its casing scarred by decades of use. Mara hesitated. Not long, just long enough for the thought to surface. I don't have to do this. There were others. Teams would come. Backup systems might recover. Maybe the hospitals had generators. Maybe. Then her headset crackled to life. A voice young, shaking. Is anyone there? This is Pediatric Wing C. We're losing pressure. Please. Mara didn't answer. She crossed the room and placed her hands on the override grips. They were cold. Above Earth, the Concordance watched. Vital signs spiked. Neural activity surged. Fear markers lit the display in sharp amber. This is the breaking point, a behavioral analyst said. The subject will retreat. Seilerin did not respond. On Earth, Mara closed her eyes and breathed once. I'm here, she whispered. Not into the headset, but to herself. She engaged the override. Pain slammed through her like lightning. The feedback surge tore through her nervous system, muscles locking as energy arced across the console. Her vision went white. Her scream echoed once, and then cut off as her jaw clenched involuntarily. The system came online. Lights flared across the city. Hospital monitors stabilized. Ventilators resumed their steady rhythm. Life flowed back into places that had been seconds from silence. Mara collapsed. Her body hit the floor hard, the override disengaging automatically as the surge dissipated. Smoke curled from scorched panels. The smell of burned insulation filled the chamber. For several seconds, she did not move. Above, the Concordance's projections fractured. She exceeded predicted tolerance, an analyst said. Her survival probability was below 5%. And yet, Seilerin murmured. Mara coughed. It hurt. Everything hurt. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. Skin blistered where the grips had burned through her gloves. She laughed weakly, one short, breathless sound. Guess. That's still working, she muttered. Her headset crackled again. Mara? We saw the lights. Was that you? She swallowed, forcing air into aching lungs. Yeah, she said. Yeah, you're good now. There was a pause. Then the same young voice, softer. Thank you. Mara closed her eyes. She did not know she was being observed. She did not know that her single, unremarkable choice had sent ripples through alien probability matrices light years away. She only knew that people were alive, and that was enough. On the Concordance vessel, silence reigned once more. This response is not aligned with self-preservation, a specialist said slowly. Seilerin's filaments dimmed, then brightened again, an unfamiliar pattern. No, she replied. It is aligned with meaning. The analyst hesitated. How do we quantify that? Seilerin watched the image of a human woman lying on a cold metal floor, breathing through pain with quiet satisfaction. We do not, she said, and that may be the problem. For the first time in her long service, Seilerin felt something she had never recorded in any assessment. Uncertainty, not about humanity's weakness, but about the Concordance's assumptions. And somewhere deep in the data, a new question began to form. What happens when a species does not measure survival by the avoidance of suffering, but by what it chooses to endure? The Concordance had not planned for hesitation. Its models assumed progression. Stimulus, response, failure, conclusion. Every phase flowed cleanly into the next, governed by logic refined over millennia. When a species faltered, the path forward was clear: escalate pressure, accelerate collapse, extract lessons. But now, something had slowed the machinery. Seilerin stood alone in the observation chamber long after the analysts had departed. The vast viewport revealed Earth rotating quietly below, oceans reflecting distant starlight like fractured mirrors. One planet, one species, still standing. The data from Mara Kincaid's incident replayed in looping fragments across the hollow field. Neural spikes, Pain thresholds exceeded, survival probability breached, and yet choice persisted. Not instinct, choice. The concordance categorized such behavior as irrational persistence. Historically, it appeared only in terminal phases of collapse, final, futile gestures before extinction. But humanity was not collapsing. That was the anomaly. Sci-Fi accessed broader datasets. Across Earth, similar patterns emerged, not dramatic, not heroic in the grand sense. Subtle acts, quiet decisions. A freight pilot diverted limited fuel to tow a stalled civilian transport through a radiation belt, stranding himself in orbit until rescue arrived days later. A city council refused evacuation orders long enough to stabilize a failing dam, knowing the flood would erase their homes but spare millions downstream. A research collective dismantled their own life support reserves to keep a struggling AI core active, believing its insights might one day prevent catastrophe, even if they would not live to see it. Each act alone was statistically insignificant. Together, they formed a pattern the concordance could not reconcile. These behaviors compound. One analyst finally admitted during an emergency council session, they reinforce resilience rather than degrade it. That is not possible, another replied. Resource depletion should accelerate failure. And yet it doesn't. Sci-Fi listened without speaking. The concordance elders convened soon after. They were ancient even by alien standards, entities whose cognitive frameworks had been shaped during eras when stars were younger and civilizations far rarer. Their forms shimmered within containment fields, vast and slow-moving, like living constellations. The test must continue, intoned Elder Veiltor. Humanity has not yet reached its limit. Sci-Fi inclined herself. We may be misidentifying that limit. A ripple of irritation passed through the chamber. Elaborate. Our framework assumes endurance is finite, she said carefully. That suffering erodes cohesion. Humans demonstrate a counter-effect. Hardship appears to clarify their priorities. That is sentiment, Veiltor replied. Not data. Sci-Fi brought the data forward anyway. Visuals filled the chamber, images from Earth drawn from observation drones and intercepted broadcasts. Humans sharing power from personal generators with strangers. Engineers sleeping beside failing reactors, hands never leaving control panels. Children studying by emergency light, reciting lessons as if routine itself were an act of defiance. These are not isolated anomalies, Sci-Fi said. They are cultural reflexes. Silence followed. Then another elder spoke, its voice slower, heavier. If this is true, it said, then escalation may not produce collapse. Correct, Sci-Fi replied. It may produce adaptation, a dangerous word. The concordance had always believed adaptation followed survival, not preceded it. Veiltor's lights dimmed. Then we apply a different pressure. The next phase was approved. Not deprivation, temptation. Across Earth, a signal bloomed, subtle, encrypted, irresistible to human curiosity. It appeared first in research labs, then corporate networks, then military channels. A technological gift. Clean energy algorithms, gravity harmonics, solutions to problems humanity had struggled with for generations. The message was simple. Compliance will accelerate recovery. No threats, no force, just opportunity. Governments debated in closed chambers. Corporations salivated. Populations, weary from months of strain, looked upward with cautious hope. And humanity stood at a crossroads the concordance understood well. Most species broke here. They always did. On Earth, a summit convened. Leaders, scientists, ethicists gathered beneath a banner hastily raised from blackout cloth and salvaged lights. A woman spoke first. An old engineer, her hands still scarred from decades of work. This isn't aid, she said. It's a leash. A younger delegate argued back. We're drowning. If they can help. They already showed they won't, the engineer replied. Help doesn't come with conditions. A murmur spread. Screens flickered as analysts presented projections. Accept the technology, and Earth could leap forward centuries. Reject it, And the struggle would continue, hard, uncertain, human. The room grew quiet. Then a voice rose from the back. Steady, familiar to millions. Mara Kincaid. She stood uncomfortably at the podium, a technician among leaders, invited only because someone remembered what she had done. I don't know politics, she said. I don't know galactic stuff, but I know this. She held up her bandaged hands. When things went dark, nobody promised me a reward. Nobody offered me a shortcut. I acted because someone needed me to. She looked around the room. If we accept this, what happens the next time they decide we should kneel again? No one answered. The vote was taken. Narrow, painfully narrow. Humanity refused. Above Earth, alarms cascaded through the Concordance's systems. They rejected optimization, an analyst said. Voluntarily. Veiltor's voice resonated with disbelief. They chose hardship. Selarin watched Earth continue its slow, defiant rotation. No, she corrected softly. They chose autonomy. For the first time, the Concordance recorded a new classification in its archives. Species exhibits resilience beyond predictive surrender thresholds. And beneath that, a note entered not by algorithm but by an observer who was beginning to understand. They are not enduring the test. They are deciding who they are. The refusal changed everything. Across the Concordance, probability engines recalculated in frantic silence. Entire predictive branches collapsed into error states, cascading like falling dominoes through systems that had not failed in 10,000 cycles. Humanity was supposed to bend. Instead, it had drawn a line. Elder Veiltor did not hide its agitation. Its stellar form pulsed brighter than regulation allowed, containment fields humming as ancient patience thinned. They have rejected assistance, it said. They have rejected optimization. They have rejected survival efficiency itself. To them, survival is not the highest value, Selarin replied, a dangerous truth to speak aloud. Then we test what is, Veiltor declared. Initiate phase final. The word echoed through the chamber. Final. For the Concordance, this phase was reserved for species that refused categorization, civilizations whose unpredictability threatened the stability of galactic order. It was not annihilation. Not yet. It was exposure. Across human space, the stars changed. Trade routes warped subtly, gravitational lanes destabilized. Navigation beacons, once constant, began to drift. Supply chains frayed. Communication delays stretched from seconds to minutes, then hours. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its interconnectedness. The Concordance pulled on that thread. On Earth, the effects were immediate. Orbital stations reported misalignments. Lunar facilities lost synchronized time. Off-world colonies went silent, one by one, swallowed not by violence but by distance. Panic spread faster than any invasion ever could. In a command center buried beneath what had once been a mountain, human leaders watched the galaxy fragment on their displays. They're isolating us, a strategist said quietly, piece by piece. They want us to fracture, another replied, to turn inward. Mara Kincaid sat against a wall, helmet resting beside her. She was not supposed to be there, but no one had the energy to send her away anymore. They don't understand us, she said. A general turned toward her. Explain. When things get hard, Mara continued, we don't pull apart, we reach farther. As if summoned by the words, a signal broke through the static. Weak, fragmented, human-made. A colony transmission, bouncing through improvised relays and jury-rigged amplifiers. We're still here, the voice crackled. Low power, no resupply, but we're adapting. Another signal followed, then another. Mining outposts shared oxygen protocols. Agricultural domes exchanged seed data. Engineers on Mars rewrote navigation algorithms on the fly, using pulsars instead of beacons. Disconnected, but not divided. Selarin watched in stunned silence as the Concordance's isolation metrics began to reverse. They're building redundancy faster than expected, an analyst said. Independent networks, decentralized coordination. They're improvising, Another added. Under live stress, Veiltor's voice lowered. Increase pressure. And the stars answered. A localized stellar flare, artificial, controlled, erupted near a human-controlled system. Not enough to destroy worlds, enough to threaten them. On Earth, warning sirens wailed as solar radiation spiked. Power grids trembled. Satellites burned bright and brief across the sky like falling embers. In one coastal city, seawalls began to fail as emergency systems faltered. Mara was already moving. She didn't wait for orders, didn't ask permission. She grabbed her helmet, sprinted toward a transport already over capacity. "You're not cleared," someone shouted. She was gone before the sentence finished. The transport screamed across the darkened ocean, buffeted by electromagnetic storms. Inside, engineers clung to restraints as alarms layered over one another. "We can't stabilize the wall remotely," the pilot yelled. "Manual override's the only option." Mara smiled grimly. "Then land me." They touched down hard, metal screaming against concrete as waves hammered the barrier. The air tasted of salt and ozone. Mara ran. She ran through wind that tore at her suit, through spray that blinded her sensors, through fear that had long since stopped being frightening and simply became familiar. At the control nexus, the manual systems were ancient, mechanical, stubborn, human. She braced herself and pulled. Hydraulics groaned. The wall shifted inch by inch as the storm howled in protest. Her muscles screamed, her vision blurred, and she laughed. Short, breathless, defiant. "Not today," she whispered. Above, Concordance observers recorded something unprecedented. Despite catastrophic environmental stress, despite zero strategic value in the individual, the human persisted. Not because she had to, because she chose to. "Energy expenditure exceeds rational parameters," an analyst muttered. Selarin felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. "That's not irrational," she said. "That's resolve." The seawall locked into place moments before the surge hit. The city held. Across Earth, similar stories unfolded, not broadcast, not dramatized, simply lived. Firefighters, technicians, farmers, pilots. Humans doing what they had always done when the universe pushed too hard. They pushed back. Veiltor watched the failure cascade through its systems. "Cease observation," it ordered. "Prepare containment." But Selarin spoke before the command could finalize. "If we continue," she said carefully, "we may not be testing humanity anymore." Veiltor turned. "We may be forging them." Silence fell. For the first time since the Concordance's formation, an elder hesitated. And in that hesitation, the galaxy shifted. The Concordance had never feared escalation. For millennia, pressure had been its most precise instrument. Gravity wells tightened. Resource streams narrowed. Environmental variables spiked until fragile civilizations cracked. Quietly, predictably, folding themselves into safer, smaller shapes. Humanity did not fold. It burned brighter. Across Concordance observation arrays, data began to contradict itself. Survival projections climbed instead of falling. Psychological collapse curves flattened. Cooperative behavior intensified under stress instead of fracturing. Every model broke the same way. "They're converting pressure into cohesion," an analyst whispered. Veiltor stared into the star map, its stellar body dimmer now, containment fields struggling to stabilize its radiance. "That is impossible," it said. Selarin did not answer immediately. Her attention was fixed on a different feed, one the elders had not prioritized. A simple transmission, no encryption, no challenge, just a message repeating across fractured space on every frequency humanity could reach. "We're still here," over and over, not a declaration of dominance, not a plea, a statement of fact. Selarin felt something in her ancient mind shift, an alignment she had not experienced since her earliest cycles. "They're not resisting us," she said slowly. "They're refusing to disappear." Veiltor's light pulsed uneven. "Refusal does not alter reality." "Sometimes," Selarin replied, "it becomes reality." Before Veiltor could respond, a new alert surged through the chamber. Unauthorized approach detected. The analysts froze. No species had ever done this. A small vessel emerged from folded space at the edge of Concordance-controlled territory. Its drive signature was crude, inefficient, patched together from designs the Concordance had deemed obsolete centuries ago. It drifted, unarmed, unshielded, alive. A probe? Someone said. No, another corrected. Life signs confirmed. The vessel broadcast on open channels. A human voice, calm, unadorned. This is Mara Kincaid of Earth. We know you're watching. Veiltor flared. Terminate transmission. The command did not execute. The probe continued. We're not here to threaten you, Mara said. We don't even know if we could. A pause. But we're not going to vanish quietly either. Inside the vessel, Mara floated alone, tethered to a seat reinforced with little more than stubborn engineering and faith. The stars outside were vast, indifferent. She had never felt smaller. She had never felt stronger. Back on Earth, people watched the live relay in silence. Farmers, engineers, children sitting cross-legged on concrete floors. No one told her what to say. She spoke anyway. You tested us, Mara continued. Our limits, our systems, our endurance. Her breath steadied. You found our breaking points. Another pause. And you learned something you didn't expect. Seilerin leaned closer to the projection. We don't break the way you do, Mara said softly. We don't optimize suffering away. We don't always choose the efficient path. A flicker of a smile crossed her face. We choose each other. The chamber was silent. Even Veiltor did not speak. Mara looked straight into the camera, into the ancient eyes beyond it. You asked what keeps us going, she said. Why we rebuild. Why we hold the line when logic says we shouldn't. Her voice carried, not loud, not dramatic, just true. It's because somewhere, someone is counting on us not to give up. The probe drifted closer, crossing a boundary no human vessel had ever crossed. Concordance weapon systems did not fire. They could not. Threat assessment algorithms returned null. This is not a challenge, an analyst said, shaken. This is testimony. Veiltor's light dimmed further, its voice quieter than ever recorded. What would you have us do? It asked. Mara didn't answer right away. She looked out at the galaxy, at its endless stars, its ancient order, its careful distances. Then she said, Stop trying to shape us. Just let us be. Seilerin felt the weight of eons settle into a single moment. The Concordance had believed itself the guardian of survival. But survival, it realized now, was not merely endurance. It was meaning. Veiltor slowly inclined its luminous form, a gesture never before made toward a lesser species. Observation will cease, it declared. Interference withdrawn. Across the galaxy, pressure vanished. Trade lanes stabilized. Stars returned to predictable rhythms. Human systems breathed again. On Earth, people didn't cheer. They exhaled. Mara's probe turned gently, its mission complete. As it drifted homeward, Seilerin watched the tiny human craft fade into starlight. They will change the galaxy, she said. Veiltor did not argue. For the first time, the Concordance recorded a new classification. Not subject, not anomaly, witness. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If the story moved you, subscribe HFY Story Vault for more human stories from the stars.